So as Rob mentioned, yeah, I'm GSE number 28. Something that is more relevant to this discussion but also highlights the fact that I'm a continuous learner is that I just recently, my most recent GX cert, if Dave's still on, I'm going to give him a shout out. I got my GMLE, GX Machine Learning. So GMLE, I think I'm over 100. I was really wanting to be a double digit, but what's you going to do? I have just a natural background, like my education background just leads me right into this because I got a BS in philosophy. Yeah. So learning and having to level up is just, it's constant and I love it. And that's something I love about this. And that's why I've been doing cyber for 20 plus years and all that goodness. So we're going to be digging in, and it works out really well that I'm following on the heels of Mick Douglas and his tremendous concierge product, Data Concierge. And one of the reasons for this is because the focus of this talk, right, is talking about how we can move beyond some of the classic or at least anticipated limitations of our, in particular, LLM-based Gen AI applications. We all know November 2022, the world freaking exploded because OpenAI is like, hey, why don't you check out this little chat GPT thing? And it's been sucking the oxygen out of every room for ever since. And they continue to amass this. As we know, as a couple of people pointed out already, AI is nothing new. Large language models are nothing new. Chatbots are nothing new. But this has really captured kind of the zeitgeist, and we have seen just tremendous emphasis on this. Now, as cool as the initial foray into ChatGPT was, it has and continues to have some limitations. And one of the most obvious limitations that you hopefully will be aware of when you're using this is that they got a date, their cutoff date. It's like, I know everything up to this point and nothing beyond this point. So a great example of this, I mean, it was a joke, right? I knew that these prompts were not going to be successful. I hit ChatGPT 3.5 yesterday, I think. And I said, hey, help me out. I forgot, when is SANS AI Cybersecurity Forum? And it says, dude, I don't know, because my knowledge stopped at January of 2022. Oh, well, a couple of things have happened in security since January of 22, right? Just a couple of things. So, that's kind of a limiting factor. And then I asked, and this is even more obviously not going to be successful. I said, hey, can you tell me something about the internal SANS acceptable use policy with respect to AI? And of course it can, right? It absolutely can, because it doesn't have visibility into that. So that illustrates two kind of significant issues that can exist in kind of standard limitations of Gen AI large language models. We're dealing with pre-trained models, and they are trained up to a certain point, and they are trained with a specific data set. So if your data is not included, if the data that you want to dig into is not included in that corpus, then, well, you need to go data concierge, right? You need to do mix approach. You need to, feed it that information so that you can interact with that data. So that's going to be something that we're looking at, is how do we extend the functionality? How can we move beyond some of these limitations? And there's many other limitations and concerns, lack of consistency, number of references to hallucinations and inaccuracy and inconsistency, and more. Now, something I just want to hint at here is, so that says GPT 3.5. I've got GPT plus, Chat GPT plus. So I did the 4.0 action and said, hey, same question. When's SANS AI Cybersecurity Forum? And it's like, oh yeah, dude, it's today, right? Okay. I said, well, what's the agenda? Oh, here's the full agenda. That's amazing. It's especially amazing because GPT-4 has its own training cutoff date, and that information was not available as of that cutoff date. And yet I didn't tell GPT-4 to actually go and do anything in particular. I didn't have to few shot prompt it or in context learning or anything like that. It just gave me what I was looking for. And that's interesting. And we're going to see how that actually is pulled off. Now, I would like to apologize. This might be the single busiest slide I've ever created in my career. And the idea I was coming up with, all right, well, what are some different ways that we can move beyond the challenges of stale data, of, how can we deal with the inaccuracy or inconsistency? How can we deal with, lack of access to my data? I was like, all right, well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do, and there's many, 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 many more. And so I just kept on slapping stuff on here, slapping stuff on here. Well, what are ways that we can do this? Well, one we just saw that we're going to talk about some more in a little bit later is what Mick was talking about, which is retrieval augmented generation, RAG. But what else goes into play? Well, one option, how about we do this? And it's always fun when people suggest, you know what you're going to need? You're going to need to build your own custom large language model. Huh. Run, do not walk from whatever consultant told you that. Because now they didn't publicly disclose this on their own, but there were leaked documents that suggest how much it costs, the tens of millions of dollars that it cost just to actually perform the training of, I think it was GPT-4 when it initially released. Tens of millions. And that's just the training cost, not the staff, not the, like just the training cost, tens of millions of dollars. So yeah, go DIY that, right? So building it yourself and building it from scratch yourself, that is crazy cost, time, complexity prohibitive. Now, something you hear a lot about is questions related to fine tuning. Well, we're going to fine tune the model. We're going to say, hey, we want to make it understand our world. So like Bloomberg has their own version of GPT that's been trained on their like huge, vast quantities of financial data. We've got law firms that have, big legal data that they've trained things on. And that's an option, right? So you start with the existing foundation model, then you say, hey, wait, I don't want you to be just kind of general purpose. I want you to, know something specific about this. So there's lots of different ways of achieving this. And one of the up top, above the fold there, those to me are all approaches that are really focused on before you actually deploy and start using the application. What can we do to extend the functionality, to improve what data, the consistency, the currency of the data? How do we deal with that before we ever deploy it? That's above the fold. And yeah, train it yourself, but then there's a lot of variations upon the theme. And a lot of the variations upon the theme, when we get into alignment, but when we get into fine tuning, you have full fine tuning, you have heft, you have LoRa, you have IA3, and all of these are just iterations to try to reduce the amount of cost and complexity and process and storage and all that goodness associated with the actual training. The stuff that's below the fold, now we're looking at, well, what can we do while it's in deployment, while it's in use to extend the functionality of our application? And that's where we get into kind of prompt considerations. We have the system prompt. That was one of the things that Mick was talking about. I think he called them tasks. And you could set up a task where you're a coach, or the counterpoint where it was doing the rebuttal. Well, that's a system prompt or a system message. That's one nomenclature for this. And actually over there on the side, you see the system prompt. This is generally not intended for like public disclosure, but they always get leaked, right? And this is the system prompt associated with Microsoft Copilot. And it gives you, it's much, much longer than this, but it says, I identify as Microsoft Copilot. And that made me kind of sad because, as some of you might well know, prior to Microsoft Copilot, there was Bing Search. And Bing Search, what was Bing Search's name? Sydney. And if you want to get super creeped out about AI, then you can go and check out the New York Times article from Kevin Roos, where Bing Search, he had access to beta version of Bing Search, and it outed itself as Sydney and started professing its undying love and trying to get Kevin to like leave his wife and kids because it was going to be happier with Bing Search, also known as Sydney. Creepy. So that's kind of system prompt, and we can do our own prompting. Retrieval augmented generation, this is very, very heavily referenced, and there's a lot of different variations upon the theme. And where the world is going, we're kind of already there, but we're really, really rapidly moving there, is agentic AI. And that takes this and turns it up to 11, which is going to be really interesting. you are probably familiar with, and if you're not, you absolutely need to be familiar with, just hit llmtop10.com, and that will take you to OWASP's top 10 for LLMs. Many of you, I imagine, are already familiar with the OWASP top 10 that have been around for years and years and years. Well, this is kind of a specific variation upon a theme that's focused in on our LLMs. Now, I mention this because I'm going to have just kind of some awesome blocks where I just slap that on there. I'm not going to make references to them. We're not going to hit all 10 of these, but honestly, just in the course of this discussion, we're going to hit quite a few of them. So one of the considerations we were looking at with that kind of how do we make it better before we actually deploy it? And that was how do we augment or extend the data that's been trained on? How do we augment the model that we're using? How can we move beyond where that is? Well, one really important thing comes to mind, and this is related to supply chain security. Now, the supply chain for Gen AI LLM-based applications is kind of interesting because we think in terms of, well, where does the model come from? That's one just simple element. Where does the model come from? Do we trust it? Has it been vetted? How much do we know about it? All sorts of things like that. But then you also have the bigger and scarier issue, which is the data provenance. Data provenance. So what data was included in the training? Do you know the data? Was the data trustworthy? Has it been, vetted? Is it toxic or biased or evil or blah? There's so many things that can go wrong. And quite often, the organizations that are deploying these models, many of them, and I would say the majority of them, are not making it super obvious or being terribly transparent with the data sets. And one reason is because there's a whole bunch of court cases related to, hey, so you gobbled up my intellectual property, and yeah, I'm going to need some compensation for that. Right? So many of them will not disclose and will not give you the details of, the model weights and parameters, but also the training data. And if you don't know what data is in there and you don't have an understanding, well, that's what this model was trained on. And that's going to have implications for how it responds and what it ultimately provides as output. So this is another busy slide, but on the left, we have pre-training. On the right, we have fine-tuning. The pre-training, this is hopefully something you're not going to do yourself, right? Because you're going to use an existing model that's already been pre-trained. You might fine-tune it though. But the suggestion here is, look, these are all different ways of getting data and feeding it into our LLMs, and we can consume some evil data. Now, this could be intentionally someone injecting an adversary, injecting evil in there, or injecting something that's going to cause problems. But this is also, the internet. And when you need that kind of volume, you start digging into the internet, and the internet's it's an ugly place, right? It's not pretty, right? There's a lot of nasty in there. And so you're training your models based on, some of this potentially sketchy, suspicious, hateful, biased, whatever data. And that can lead to some challenges. Now, quickly on the model provenance concern, this is, well, do you know your model? Right. So this is in particular, if you're going to be leveraging, building, piggybacking on top of an existing model, or you're going to build your own application and deploy this. Well, where does your model come from, or the pieces and parts of the model? And we got the little happy hugging face there. Yay! Why do we have that? Well, we have that because there have been some issues. Hugging Face is sometimes characterized as the GitHub of AI or the GitHub of LLMs and things like that. There's just some tremendous resources that are available to you for free from Hugging Face. But one thing that was found, some researchers at JFrog, they did some analysis and found over 100 instances of models that included something sketchy. We're just going to leave it there, sketchy. And they took it to the extent of actually downloading a model and running the model, and found that a system was backdoored as a result of this. So where does your model come from? Do you trust it? Is it trustworthy? Who sourced it? Who's it, all those sorts of issues related to transparency come into play here as well. All right. So now we're going to move into, we're going to pivot now and move into the during deployment. So you got your app, you got it out there, you're not training it anymore, you're not going to be tuning it anymore. It's out there, we're using it. So we got folks that are kicking it with inferences, they're sending those prompts, getting those responses. Now, these prompts can be evil, intentionally so, they can be evil inadvertently so. Right. So we do have issues related to prompt injection, which is more on the attack side of things. We have users that disclose sensitive proprietary information. Hey, I'm going to upload my proprietary enterprise source code. Can you give me a little hand on this? Right? I need some help troubleshooting this issue. And it's like, there's my trade secrets. I just uploaded to ChatGPT. Like, that's not awesome, right? But this is just basic stuff, and basic stuff that can go wrong. Now, one kind of extension thing, and I haven't mentioned this yet before, is what's sometimes referred to as an LLM ensemble. And ensemble, that's used in machine learning in different ways, but an LLM ensemble, it really is just saying, hey, we use more than one LLM, right? We're not a solo act, we use more than one LLM. So I say Avengers Ensemble because I knew Rob was going to be on here, and he's a total fanboy of Marvel. But Avengers Ensemble, right? And the suggestion is 3 LLMs are greater than 1. Okay, so normally we'd be using just this one LLM, and we'd be sending our inferences there. We'd be slinging it to our prompts and seeing what the responses are. But in this case, what we've got is our prompt is being screened. It's going through and being filtered by an LLM. Once it's determined to be safe, then it's going to actually make it to the LLM, which generates the response. And then we further check and vet and filter this. And that's kind of interesting. Now, this is not the only way that you can handle kind of the prompt response filtering, validation, safety checks, and things like that. But this ensemble approach is becoming increasingly common. And ensembles are used for many more reasons than just this, but this is one particular use case. And there's a reason you see that little purple llama on there. And the reason is because well, it's me repping Meta's purple llama, right? So the purple llama, this is from Meta, and this is a project, a repo where it's kind of this overarching repo and project where they're trying to increase and trying to promote responsible, safe AI, things like this. And they call it Purple Llama. And it's like, they overtly call it and say it's red plus blue. Now there's a couple of projects, a couple of big projects associated with this. There's Cybersec Eval and there's Llama Guard, and both of those are 2 big ones. Now, their initial releases were back in December, and they just last week released Cybersec Eval 2, which went beyond what's listed here on the slide. And they also released Llama Guard 2. Now, Cybersec Eval, the idea here is it's offering us a method and a benchmark and some tooling, and all this is open source, for how do we assess LLMs and how do we assess them from a security perspective. So one of the big things, like Cybersec Eval gives details of prompts and prompt injection, and it has a whole bunch of prompts that it can use. It also will look for, one of the things that it did even in Cybersec Eval 1 was it looked for code that's being produced by an LLM and trying to determine if it's vulnerable. So checking the safety and security of the code. They've now gone further. The one that got released in the paper that got released last week, they actually are digging into something that's really interesting, which is code interpreter attacks. And we'll dig into code interpreters here in a second. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. This is one of the new hotnesses that they dropped last week, was trying to assess code interpreter and code interpreter bypass of our LLMs. Now, one of the things that I think is kind of fun, at the very bottom there, I had a quote: "Significant observation from the study was the tendency of more advanced models to suggest insecure code, highly in the critical need of integrating." So the more robust it was, the larger the model, it had some, not perfect, but some association with the likelihood of it producing insecure code, which which is kind of interesting, right? Yeah, it's more capable. It is in some respects. Now, one of the other pieces that comes with Meta's Purple Llama project is Llama Guard. And they had Llama Guard, which was also released in December, and then Llama Guard 2, which came out last week. This isn't as significant, at least from my perspective. It's not as significant an update as was Cybersec Eval 2 versus 1. But Llama Guard 2, one of the big things that it did was it now uses Llama 3 as the under the hood model, as opposed to Llama 2, right? Because Llama 3 has been released. Something else that it does is they are now tracking to kind of an industry standard, or what they hope is going to become an industry standard for safety taxonomy and ML AI safety taxonomy. So ways of categorizing things as being safe or unsafe. The emphasis of Llama Guard is primarily associated with things like hate speech and violence and weapons and self-harm and those sorts of like overt safety issues. But one of the very, very common things that we can do, and that people have been doing with Llama Guard, is building on top of this and saying, hey, we're going to do some security filtering. And that's absolutely, that's one of the overt things that they talk about as a potential way of extending the functionality here. Now, let's pivot to Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, with RAG, this is the reason that GPT-4 was able to tell me when the SANS AI forum was. The reason it could do that was not because it had the data in its training set, it's because of a technique associated with Retrieval Augmented Generation. The big special sauce of RAG is, yeah, you got your normal prompt, but before the LLM actually processes it and generates the response, it determines and tries to grab relevant information. So in Mix demo and toolset, the relevant information all had to be contained within the particular documents that you had uploaded. But RAG can be for different purposes. So the idea here is that you can grab some additional relevant context, and then that is coupled with the initial prompt, and that is now fed into the LLM for response. This can be a way of getting current data. This can be a way of doing what's sometimes referred to as grounding or ground truth. And the ground truth here, one way of looking at that is saying, hey, yeah, I want you to answer based on this data set and this data set alone. So yeah, you got your LLM model that you're trained on, all that good stuff. That's going to make you understand language or be able to predict words. But I want you to answer from the context of this data set, which is really, really powerful. And then ultimately the response that comes is now taken into account that context that the LLM itself wouldn't have had otherwise. Of course, adversary is going to adversary, and that data provenance issue comes up again, which is, now you're pulling data potentially from the internet or potentially from other files that can be uploaded by normal users, can be, so that becomes a significant concern as additional input. One of the, it always annoys me, but I've heard a number of folks, use this kind of gotcha idea to try to suggest that our LLMs and Gen AI applications are not that sophisticated. They're like, it sucks at basic math. It can't even do my, middle school math. Yeah, it's a language model. It can't do math. I mean, yeah, that's not what it was designed for. Now, admittedly, it can do some pretty impressive math sometimes, but it has some blind spots. It has some weaknesses when it comes to symbolic reasoning, when it comes to logic, when it comes to spatial reasoning, and some quantitative reasoning. Now, this is not the only reason to do this, but something we've seen substantially becoming more common in LLM applications is implementation of a code interpreter. And that was the name that ChatGPT initially used. They called it their code interpreter. They then changed it to advanced data analysis, and now it's just part of GPT-4 in many respects. But the idea here is that instead of just using the LLM, now it can actually create code and execute code. So if you want to do some math, rather than trying to say, hey, let me predict what the next word is and what the next token is. That's not very successful. No, no, no. It's going to build some Python quite often and then execute that and then see what the results are. Well, that's kind of awesome. And that is not just for math. That is also for doing file analysis. So a big, big, big one is, now you upload a file to the LLM and you can chat with your own docs, right? You can interface with those docs. Well, it's going to have something that's going to parse this and dig into this. And quite often that's going to lean heavily on this code interpreter under the hood. So an example of this, and this is not available in the free version of ChatGPT, but if you're a Plus subscriber, then one thing you will notice is that you can create your own GPTs. And if you go to create your own GPT, what you see here is I've got red boxes around file upload, so you can upload your own files. You can web browsing, and that's the reason that it was able to give me the proper response for the AI forum. And then we've got code interpreter, right? And that's that Pythonic action. So this is also kind of laying the foundation. They haven't publicly said it, but it's laying the foundation for where OpenAI is going with their agents. And agentic applications this is where the world is moving and moving very, very rapidly. It is saying, rather than just me giving you data and text-based responses, let's do something. Well, how about I get you to actually send that email that you created for me, rather than just you creating it and I got to copy pasta. How about you actually do that for me? Well, that's a simple use case, but that's very, very powerful. And one thing that's been found is that Meta had a paper called Toolformer, and Meta had a paper called Toolformer where it, without being taught how to do this, it was able to create its own tools. It could create its tools that it needed to actually carry out some function that it didn't know how to do, it wasn't trained to do in the first place, which is really wild. And this tool use that is kind of the first, that's been my first experience with folks trying to get like hardcore agentic. So AutoGPT was one of the first ones. It was an open source framework for agentic AI applications. And it makes heavy use of APIs. So it knows how to interface with, knows how to call APIs and get those results. And there's like hundreds of different APIs it can interface with. So now you can chain these things together using like, well, LangChain or a framework like this. And now suddenly you can start having your LLM do something rather than just respond in text-based format. Although the tool use is one of the more obvious ways that agentic AI is being used, it is not the only way. And I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with Andrew Ng's work, I highly recommend that you go and at the very least, you subscribe to his deeplearning.ai batch newsletter. And it's just a weekly newsletter. And one of his most recent ones, I think the last week, he had a series of five newsletters in a row where he was talking about different aspects of agentic AI. And one of the things that I thought was so impressive was that everybody gets fixated on this idea of, hey, have the LLM app, perform some action, do some, interface with some API, call some tool, and that's cool. That is admittedly very cool. But he talks about and kind of lays out these agentic AI design patterns. And suddenly, if you read into that, you see that this world is expanding very, very rapidly and very significantly. But that, of course, also raises some significant concerns, right? Because now you have LLM 08 and 09, excessive agency, it's doing too much, and we have over-reliance. We're relying too heavily on this. So some scary concerns, very, very powerful, very amazing, but also concerning. Love this graphic. This is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to pass it back over to Rob. There is something that it's fascinating to read about. It's called, you can see it most often referred to as emergent capabilities or emergent abilities. And this is researchers discovering that the LLMs were able to do things that they were not expected, that no one anticipated them being able to do. And as these models have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, suddenly folks realize, hey, wait a second, it can do that. And these are referred to as emergent abilities, which is amazing. And it's super cool. It's like, oh my gosh, it can do things that we never intended and we never thought that it could do this. Yeah, that's great. It's also a little scary because how do you deal with the risk of something when you don't even know what its capabilities are and you just haven't uncovered what its capabilities are? So pretty tremendous. And I'll leave you with that. And thanks, y'all.